Hello and welcome to our next edition of the MarketingBitz webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Don't Let a Slow Website Hurt Your Business. Get Up to Speed with AMP. And will be brought to you by our guest presenter Dagmar Marketing. This is Joe from the local search association, and I just had a few quick housekeeping slides before we get into the bulk of the presentation. So next slide please. In case you're unfamiliar, this is your first kind of encounter with MarketingBitz. MarketingBitz is a resource for small businesses, basically all focused on digital marketing. So the fundamentals, some more advanced topics as well. We provide a lot of different advice and insights via articles, webinars, events, reports, in a number of different ways. MarketingBitz was created by the local search association, and the local search association is a not-for-profit trade association. Can you go back one slide, Chris, please? Oh, thank you. We have roughly 300 members in about 20 countries. And again, local search association represents the local marketing and advertising space, and Dagmar is one of those members as well. So next slide, please. So let's get into a little bit about why speed matters with websites. I think some of it is probably pretty intuitive. I think most people understand that a website needs to load quickly, otherwise it will be abandoned. But let's just put some figures to it. So basically, I think with the rise of the mobile phones and really digital technology in general, our attention spans seem to be getting shorter and shorter. There was a recent study from Microsoft saying that the average human being has an attention span of about 8 seconds, which is pretty short, all things considered. And then another stat that came from Google: over half of mobile site visits will leave a page if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the immediacy of the mobile phone. I mean, you want to look up something, you want to look it up now, you want to be sure that the content that you're accessing comes up quickly, otherwise I'll just go to the next site. So, and then the chart to the right, you can kind of see this arc where as load time increases, so does drop-off rate for websites. So again, our attention spans are short, and we're going to, as consumers and as customers, we're going to abandon sites if they don't load quickly. Next slide, please. Another big part of that, so kind of aligned with that, is just the overall user experience. Again, if a site's not loading, or if it's loading, some images are here and some are there, and they're not all coming together at once, then that's not a very good user experience. So the faster the site is in terms of loading and loading properly, then that's the better the experience. And if we kind of follow that logic down, a better experience means longer time on site. You're not going to get those high abandonment rates when your website's loading quickly, because then people can access the content. So as there are kind of longer time spent on site, there's more consideration of your business and of your brand. So when there's more consideration, again, better chance that sales can happen, or lead generation. So the whole experience of the website, speed is fundamental to that, because again, people are looking for that instant information. They want to find out something, they want to find it out now. So it's imperative that small business websites kind of provide this great, fast, efficient user experience, so that the consumer or the potential customer can make a decision, an informed decision, using the information that's on the site. So next slide, please. And then there's this, very big kind of implication on speed that's kind of been developing over the last few years, and really it's now going to impact how you rank on a search engine, specifically Google. So site speed is currently a signal used by Google's algorithm to rank pages. I don't think it's been totally identified as how much of a factor, but it is a factor. And then that's desktop, but Google stated that starting in July, page speed will be a ranking factor for mobile searches as well. So as people migrate over to the mobile devices and are searching more online with their phones, Google wants to make sure that experience is efficient and that people can access information well. So when websites don't have a quick load, if it doesn't load correctly or quickly, that site will be kind of lower in the results. But according to Google, the speed update will only affect the slowest pages. So the pages that are maybe somewhere in the middle maybe won't be as affected. It's really just to clean up on the low end is what it seems like so far. But obviously that can change at any point. But That's just kind of the lay of the land in terms of why a website should be fast or needs to be fast, and why small businesses should be taking note of their site speed. So I want to hand it over to Chris now from Dagmar to kind of go into some more specifics around how to actually address that. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for having me. I appreciate everyone's time. I know webinars, you want to make sure that you get something out of it, and that'll be my goal today, is to make sure that you have some action items to come out of this webinar. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard of AMP, but maybe don't know exactly what AMP is. But before we get too far into it, I just want to say that at the end of the day, it's just a faster loading mobile page. And so if we get through this and AMP isn't, you decide AMP isn't for you, or it's too complicated, just keep in mind that these page speed ranking factors are gaining in significance. And even though Joe is right, it's hard to say what the weight is. In our experience at Dagmar, and we focus solely on SEO, it's a pretty significant part of the equation. I wouldn't put it up there with link building or long form or quality content, but I would say it's in my top 5. We've seen pages that have a bad, the only thing they have is a bad load time, and they don't rank. So it's a pretty important factor. And everything that Google is alluding to, that it's going to be a higher importance as time goes on. So they have created AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. So because the web has, actually the bandwidth on the web has increased, the load times of pages has increased as well. Video now is a lot easier to build, and so it's starting to show up and proliferate throughout the web pages. You can see this AMP page here has a video on it. So the pages have actually gotten slower as a result of the increase in speed. So anytime you have a CMS involved, there's usually a database, and so that really slows down the loading of these pages when it has to query a database. So Google wanted to combat this and say, let's have a protocol or guidelines as to what makes a fast page, and let's just, really what they did is just cut out a lot of the cool guts of HTML and say, let's just use this very slimmed down form of HTML, and we'll call it AMP, and but everyone abides to it, and it creates this very fast user experience. It is a joint project between Google and Twitter, so Google isn't the only player, and several publishers have jumped on board as well. It's been out for a couple years. It's actually in its 3rd year, and it is evolving. So whatever we say today is only going to be good for so long. So keep that in mind. It is open source, so many people are contributing to it. It's not true open source because there are what we call gatekeepers with Google and Twitter, so it's got to pass their muster. But it is open source, so people can contribute. And that URL right there, ampproject.org, that is the actual project if you want to go and check it out yourself. A couple key stats, we won't dwell on these, but there's 1.5 billion AMP pages. That's quite a lot, and it's probably a lot more today than even at the time I did this, this slide. It does offer a speed increase of 400% over typical mobile pages. I think that's relative. At the end of the day, though, it is a significant speed increase. We've implemented AMP pages, and you're going to see a night and day difference with speed. But it's, when you take out a lot of the cool factors, large images, a lot of the things that make a web site perform well and look good, it's going to load faster. So think of it as a WordPress theme that is highly designed. It's going to load slower versus just a basic theme. So that's the thing to keep in mind. It does load faster, but it doesn't do a whole lot. What's more significant over the faster load times is it just requires less bandwidth. And that's key because it's mobile phones. You're going to find different bandwidth levels all across the United States. And so there really was you have to develop with the lowest common denominator there in mind. So it does require a lot less bandwidth. There's a lot of early adopters, Wired, Gizmodo, and Slate saw some pretty significant increases, but keep in mind these are all publishers, okay? So they're not necessarily what I qualify as a small business. So if you're a publisher, AMP makes a lot of sense. If you're small businesses, you have to look at some of the variables we're going to look at today. So what are accelerated mobile pages? It's just Google's process for making really fast mobile pages. They've just really stripped out a lot of the HTML that causes slow load times and giving you a very short library to work from, and it makes a very simple page, loads very fast. So it's HTML, but it is AMP HTML. So all the tags are a little bit different. They've got AMP notifiers in there, so you can't just take straight HTML and think it's going to qualify as AMP. It's not. There's a limited JavaScript library that is growing. So a lot of these third-party JavaScripts and pixels and all of these things that track, analytics is a JavaScript. You can install analytics, but maybe if you want to use Adobe or some of these other third-party analytics tools or remarketing tools, not all of them will work. So, matter of fact, most of them won't. But Google is expanding that library. The next most significant thing is Google serves up these pages out of their own caching system. So when someone, if an AMP page gets returned in a search result, it's not your website that's serving up that page. It's Google's cached version. So it's actually, you'll notice in this slide, it's actually a Google URL that's going to be in the searches. So if they click on it, it's going to show here, and then it will give attribution to where the creator of the content, and if they click on that, it will go through to your website. But when someone clicks on the link, it is going to be served up by Google. So the significance of this is Google wanted to control that so that not only is it's got to be coded, these AMP pages have to be coded in a certain way, it needs to be served up over certain protocols like HTTP 2.0, which most people aren't using today. So it's got the fastest servers to serve up these pages to increase that load or decrease that load time. The problem with this, though, is if people were to link to these pages, they may not know that this is a Google page, and they're going to link to the Google cached version. Now, Google says that they are doing a 301 redirect as far as link juice is concerned, and you'll get credit for it. I don't trust that. Google hasn't. Every time they say they're giving you full credit for a link, the reports show that we don't get it. So that is a concern. As a small business owner and someone who's doing SEO, you want to get links, and if your AMP content is getting linked to, a lot of times those links are going directly to Google's cached version. So that's an issue. But it's something that I don't think is going to change anytime soon. Why do we need AMP pages? Yes, to give mobile users faster loading time, but for all of us out there that we do care about the user, but we care about our business as well, we just want to rank better. So at the end of the day, even though we're talking about AMP, the bigger thing to keep in mind is page speed is a ranking factor. So if we can get to that ranking factor shorter with AMP, then let's take advantage of it. So the fact that Google wants us to use it, not as much a concern as the fact that if it satisfies their search algorithm and we get more traffic for it, then that's what we want to take advantage of. So obviously mobile users have surpassed desktop users, and I can say this from looking at hundreds of Google Analytics accounts for small businesses. That's true. Now, is it a large part? No, it's like 50 to 60% is mobile, depending on the business sector, and 45% is desktop. So desktop still matters, but mobile is increasing. So as a small business, we have to take it into consideration. The Mobile First Index, when I first made this slide, was coming in late 2018. Google has announced it is here. Now, that's kind of subjective. What we've noticed from Google, when they say they're rolling something out, it doesn't mean it's all out all at once. It's a rollout. So it may not be in your area. You may be serving in your segment, whatever it is. You may not feel the Mobile First Index just yet. So, but it's here and it's being rolled out. So expect it. If it's not part of your marketing mix to have a mobile first strategy, it's almost too late. So definitely want to consider mobile if you haven't already. Multiple types of media are slowing down websites. As I stated before, there's video is pretty prevalent, a lot of Flash-based. Of course, that's not good for SEO anyway. But just we're putting a lot of heavier content demands on our websites, because long-form content is here now. Multiple pictures and images, and if you don't control the bandwidth that those take up, it makes the page load really slowly. So content management systems have databases. That slows down a website. So all of these things we need to keep in mind and maximize to have a better user experience and have a faster loading page speed. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. AMP's not all good, but we're going to talk about some of the things that aren't good about AMP. They're fast. They do exactly what Google says they do. They're extremely fast. There does seem to be a ranking boost. I'm not going to say, and Google has clarified and said that there is no ranking boost for AMP qualified pages. However, again, I don't know how much I trust that, but there is a ranking boost for fast pages. So it's hard to separate whether, is this a ranking boost because it's AMP or just because it's a fast-loading page. Well, I would give credit to the fast-loading page over the AMP qualifier, but it wouldn't surprise me if Google favors AMP just to get people to adopt it more. We've seen them do that in the past. But at the end of the day, the takeaway there is a fast-loading mobile page is a rankings boost. So I wouldn't necessarily say AMP is the only way to get that rankings boost. Google is most likely to increase the AMP ranking factor, but you could also insert just a mobile, a fast page speed ranking factor too. So again, I'm not trying to make a case that AMP is the answer to all your mobile ranking problems, but it's something to consider. The bad, AMP pages require validation. You just can't code what you think or load a plugin. If you've got WordPress or some of the CMSs out there, you can do that, but it still has to pass validation. Just because you bought this plugin doesn't mean that Google's going to honor that. So, and they change the criteria, and the plugins may not be up to date. So just Google AMP validation, and you'll see the link, and you want to run your pages through there to make sure that they're validated. Right now, they're making a lot better improvements to adding lead generation forms, but right now it's clunky. If you're going to implement any kind of lead gen forms, form fill outs, you're very limited with what you can do. So again, this is good for the user experience, but not necessarily good for the small business who wants to capture leads from these users. So the conversion elements are very limited and very clunky. Again, tracking code JavaScripts can cause problems. It's Google's cached version, not your version, so people can share or provide links to Google's URL and not your URL. So sometimes that can cause an equity problem when you're trying to gain these social shares and links. And then, quite frankly, Google gains control of how we display our web pages, which I have a fundamental problem with. We want to control it as much as possible. But Google controls most of the search on the internet. Therefore, this is one more area that they can control how we serve up those pages. So I don't particularly care for that. We need to be wary of that as a small business owner. Google's own product is our websites. So I'm leery of giving up too much control to Google. The ugly, it's just ugly. I don't have any other cute way to say this. You can't add a bunch of branding elements. You can add your logo, but even that has to, even the logo, JPEG or image needs to follow their guidelines as far as how large it is, how large of a file it is. So you can't add a lot of branding signals, styles. It's going to be very simple. It's as if we went back 10 years on website design. So this is what AMP feels like to me. We're living in a day and age that websites can do a lot of things, but AMP requires us to go back about 10, 15 years, iteration one of a website. How to implement AMP. If you have a custom website, there's not much you can do other than hire a developer. And someone that's skilled at AMP, and they're just going to have to read the documentation and figure out how to do it, or hopefully you can find someone that's done it before. If you own a CMS, such as WordPress, and there are a few WordPress plugins, not all of them work great. Matter of fact, we tested just about all of the major ones, and they all had quirks. So we won't go into all the ones that you can use. Search for your CMS and look for AMP plugins, and then read the documentation. At the end of the day, though, implement it, but then you have to validate it. Regardless of how you get it implemented, you're going to want it run every page through the validator to make sure it's passing. If it doesn't pass that validator, you won't get the AMP credit, so to speak. And then make sure that if you're making an AMP page, making sure that you create a sitemap and submit that to Google. Also, you want to make sure that the canonical tag is redirected to your desktop version, so that your desktop is the authoritative resource for the content. This is just the AMP version of that. So that's how to implement. But at the end of the day, again, like I said, I want to make sure that people have a takeaway. So this is kind of the ins and outs of AMP. If it, does it make sense for all businesses? No. So what I would say is, if you're a small business and you just got your website up, you're doing some SEO, you're doing some marketing of your website, and you have a limited resources, which that's just about all of us, then if you have not maxed out your SEO, then I would not put any resources into AMP. If you're ranking for a lot of the keywords that you want to rank for, and you want to be that cutting edge and not give up anything to your competitors, then I think AMP is worth your investment. If you're a publisher and you have a blog and you're making money by traffic to your blog, you need to invest in AMP. So that's kind of my take on how much, who should be investing in AMP technology. If you're a small business and you've got other resources or better uses of the resources, you might hold off on AMP because it is quirky and it's changing, and some of the plugins have a ways to go. However, if you're not investing in page speed as a whole, you're going to want to. So the last couple slides are, if you can't do AMP and you don't feel like AMP is just too complicated, you don't want to lose control of the design of your mobile pages. You don't want to fight these lead gen forms and the limitations that you have. You want to take all of the calls to action graphics that you have and not limit it to AMP, then at least work on your page speed. So the very best way to do that, this is Google's own tool. You just type in Page Speed Insights into Google. This link will come up. You'll want to run your website, and as you can see, Diagonal Marketing here scores. Actually, this is a medium score. It's actually okay. Most websites without targeting this are in the 30s, 40s, low 50s. We got a ways to go. We're investing in page speed because this is what we do, and it's not easy. So we understand that. And if you run your own website through this, it'll give you a laundry list of things to work on. And most notably, it's going to be like image sizes are too large, and it'll tell you where those are. Here's another one that we actually prefer over PageSpeed Insight. This is gtmetrics.com, and it gives you a little bit better detail as to some of the action items that you need to take with your website. And you can see those on the right-hand side here. And we started out with a page speed score of A and then a Y-Slow score of B when we launched our new website. And believe me, we did not redesign our website. We launched a website just for page speed. We just copied the same website but then rebuilt it from the ground up. And as you can see, as time goes on, the score goes down. That Y-Slow is actually because of our images. We've been doing a lot of blog posting and uploading multiple images. And so our blog people need to work harder on making sure these images are optimized. But that's what's hurting us there. So page speed is not something you do once. It's part of your practice. And I do recommend, whether AMP is worthy of investing right now, invest your time and effort into getting, measuring your own website's page speed, adopting protocols to keep the speed that you have when it's good, keep the score that you have, and then continue to work on it, because it will continually degrade over time if you don't constantly look at it.
Thank you everyone for joining today, and Chris, thanks for giving this presentation, a lot of great information. I want to let everyone know that if you have any questions or want to be connected with Chris, his email was on the previous slide, but if you want to contact us at info@marketingbitz.com, feel free to do so. There will be a recording of this webinar sent out within 48 hours, so be on the lookout for that. So with that, thanks everybody and have a great day.
Thanks, Joe.